I hadn't been back in Blue Ridge since the summer I turned 21. The town looked smaller now, like someone had washed it in soft light and shrunk it in the dryer. From the bus window, the mountains curled around the valley like tired old men resting their backs. Snow dusted the sidewalks, not deep, but enough to remind me that winter had come early this year. Caleb was asleep, his cheek pressed to my arm, mouth slightly open. He always did that when he felt safe. I brushed a bit of his hair back from his forehead and let my eyes follow the fog rolling off the Blue Ridge Parkway. Funny, I once couldn't wait to leave this place. I used to count highway exits like I was shedding skin, but now I was coming back. Not for nostalgia, not because I missed it. I came back because my mother's hands had started shaking too hard to hold a coffee mug, and maybe because part of me was tired of pretending I'd outrun the past. Back then it was a Tuesday. I was working the closing shift at Harmon's Diner. I remember the way the screen door slammed when he walked in, like in those old westerns. Ryan Brooks. He looked like trouble and grace wrapped into one flannel shirt. Said he was just passing through on his way to Colorado. He ordered coffee, black, and a slice of pecan pie. He had this old 35mm camera slung around his neck. We got to talking. Not flirting, not yet, but curious, like two people on the edge of something they couldn't name. He asked if I played anything, because I had ink on my fingers from restringing my brother's guitar the day before. I told him I used to play piano, but not anymore. He said that was a shame, and smiled. That smile wrecked something in me. Not instantly, but like a slow storm does. Quiet at first, then it takes the roof off your house. The bus hissed to a stop at the station. Caleb stirred beside me. I exhaled and stood, pulling our bags down. I left Blue Ridge thinking I'd buried everything behind me. But ghosts have a way of catching the next bus, too. He kept coming back to the diner, said the coffee was terrible, but the conversation was good. I was smart enough to know what that meant, but too young to stop it from mattering. For 2 weeks, we were strangers orbiting each other like magnets waiting for the right pull. He showed me photos he'd taken people, mostly. Faces full of grief, wonder, and silence. I told him he saw the world like it was broken and beautiful all at once. He said, "Aren't we all?" Then came New Year's Eve. I had no plans. My mom was working the night shift at the hospital. My brother was off somewhere being loud and drunk, probably. Ryan asked if I wanted to go up to the ridge to see the stars. I said yes before I could think better of it. It was cold. He brought a blanket and 2 chipped mugs of peppermint cocoa from some gas station. We sat on the hood of his rusted truck, looking up at a sky so clear it almost hurt to breathe. He told me stories about South America, places he'd been, people he'd lost. I listened like his voice was music, and I'd forgotten how to play. When he kissed me, it didn't feel like a beginning. It felt like something inevitable. We ended up in a cabin his friend was house-sitting. There was no heat except the fire we built and each other's hands. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't planned. But it was real. Real enough that I let myself believe it meant something more than a winter night. I woke before dawn. The fire had gone out. So had he. On the windowsill was his knit beanie black, with a worn patch that read Kodak. No note, no number. Just cold air and an ache I didn't know how to name yet. I didn't cry. Not then. I folded the beanie, tucked it into my coat pocket, and walked home through the frost. I didn't know I'd just lost something I'd never get back. Not until weeks later. Not until I found out what stayed behind. Billings wasn't where I thought I'd raise a child, but after I found out I was pregnant, I needed a town that didn't know me, and Billings didn't ask questions. I found a small apartment above a florist shop and started over. I worked mornings at a piano repair shop, tuning old uprights for churches and schools. Afternoons, I picked up hours at a bakery where the coffee was strong and the tips were weak. It wasn't glamorous. Most days, it was barely survivable. But it kept the lights on. It kept Caleb fed. He came into the world during a February blizzard. The nurses said I handled the labor like a soldier. Truth is, I was too afraid to scream. I held him the second they let me. He was tiny, red-faced, and mad at everything. I whispered, "It's just you and me now." He looked up at me like he already knew. Caleb grew fast. Too fast. He walked early, talked even earlier. Smart as a whip, full of questions, full of fire. He liked to take things apart. Toy trains, toaster ovens, anything he could get his little hands on. Then he'd ask me how to fix it. Half the time, I didn't know, but I'd sit beside him and try. He had Ryan's eyes. Same color, same focus. Every time Caleb stared too long at something, quiet and curious, it felt like déjà vu tearing through my chest. Some nights, when we were lying on the floor doing puzzles, he'd ask, "Do I have a daddy?" I'd pause, smile, say, "You have me." And he'd nod, satisfied for now. But the questions came more often as he got older. Sometimes I'd catch him watching other kids with their dads at the park, his small hands tucked in his hoodie pocket, pretending not to care. Those were the moments I hated Ryan most. Not for leaving me, for leaving him. But even in my worst hours, when the bills piled up and sleep was a luxury, I never wished Caleb hadn't happened. He was my storm and my anchor. He didn't save me, but he gave me a reason to stay afloat. I found out I was pregnant in the back bathroom of a Greyhound station. I had $2 in my pocket and a bus transfer in my coat. The test came from a vending machine, wedged between Tylenol packets and energy shots. When the second line appeared, I just stared. Not in fear, not in joy, just stillness. Like my whole life had stopped to listen. I waited 3 days before telling my mother. I'd barely spoken to her since I left Blue Ridge. When she picked up, I could tell she was folding laundry, the hum of the dryer in the background, the way she always cleared her throat before speaking. I said, "Mama, I'm pregnant." She didn't say anything at first. Then she let out this soft noise, half sigh, half cry. Not disappointment, just tiredness. Like a woman who's already carried too much weight and now had one more stone to balance. She said, "Do you know what you're doing?" I whispered, "No." And then she said the only thing that's ever truly surprised me, "Then you better start learning fast." She didn't offer to save me. She didn't scold. She just told me to take care of myself and hung up. But 2 days later, a box showed up at my door. Baby books, prenatal vitamins, and one of her old knitted blankets from when I was a baby. That was how she said she loved me. The night I first felt Caleb kick, I cried so hard I thought I might break in half. Not from sadness, from fear, from the immensity of it all. I leaned over my belly and whispered, "You'll never need to earn my love. You won't have to earn a damn thing." That was the promise I made. Years passed like weathersome storms, some sunshine, But I kept that promise. Every single day. Then last fall, Mama called. Her voice was slower than I remembered. She said she dropped a glass and couldn't pick up the pieces. That was all it took. I packed our things. We were going back to Blue Ridge, whether I was ready or not. Blue Ridge hadn't changed much. The grocery store still had hand-painted signs. The gas station still played country music from rusty outdoor speakers. And Harmon's Diner, where I once served coffee to a stranger with a camera, still had the same cracked vinyl booths. I moved back into Mama's house with Caleb. It creaked more than I remembered. The windows stuck, but it smelled like lavender and old wood, and that was enough. A week after we settled in, the radiator gave out. Mama said there was a garage 2 blocks down that did honest work. I bundled up Caleb and walked there, trying not to think too much. And there he was, bent over the hood of an old Chevy, sleeves rolled, grease smudged on his jaw like it belonged there, the same curve of the shoulders, the same rhythm in his hands. Ryan Brooks. He didn't look up at first, just kept working, humming something under his breath. When he finally did glance my way, there was nothing in his eyes. No recognition, just polite curiosity, like I was any other customer. I wanted to laugh, or run, or both. I cleared my throat, asked about radiator repair. He nodded, asked for my name. I gave him a fake last name, Evans instead of Mercer, and watched for any flicker in his face. There was none. Maybe I looked different. Time has a way of sanding down your edges. I wore my hair tied back now, dressed in layers that hid more than they showed, and he'd aged in the way men do when they've seen too much. Lines deeper, eyes quieter. Still, it hurt. Because for me, every cell remembered him. The way he once looked at me like I was a photograph worth capturing. Now, he couldn't even place my face. I thanked him and left quickly. Caleb tugged my hand, asking if we could get hot chocolate on the way back. I nodded, smiling too tightly, but all I could think was this. He forgot me. But I never forgot him. It was a Thursday. Cold, but not snowing. I'd promised Caleb we'd walk to the library after school. Mama needed the car, and honestly, I needed the air. We passed the auto shop on the way back. I wasn't looking for him, but my eyes always found that garage like they had muscle memory. Ryan was outside this time, wiping his hands with a rag, laughing with another mechanic. That sound, it hadn't changed. Still low and warm, like something that melted into your bones. Caleb tugged my sleeve. "Mama, can we see the engines?" I hesitated. Too long. Caleb had already wandered toward the row of parked cars, curiosity leading his little feet. I hurried after him, but he was faster than I expected. He stopped a few feet from Ryan, head tilted, studying an old motorcycle frame like it was a museum piece. That's when Ryan turned. Their eyes met, his and Caleb's, just for a second. Ryan's smile faltered. Not confusion, not recognition, just stillness. The kind that comes when something clicks into place, but you don't yet know why. Caleb blinked up at him. "Is that a real motorcycle?" he asked. Ryan crouched down, one knee to the concrete. "Sure is, kiddo. Used to ride one just like it." His voice was softer than I remembered, like the edges had worn down. I stepped in, heart pounding. "Caleb, time to go." Ryan stood, looked at me again. Still nothing behind his eyes, but they lingered a little longer this time. Caleb waved goodbye like he always did to kind strangers. Ryan raised a hand in return, slow, unsure. I pulled Caleb away faster than I meant to. We crossed the street. My palms were sweating in my coat pockets. I didn't dare look back, but I could feel it, his gaze, following us, trying to pin down the shape of something his memory hadn't yet caught up to. And that was the moment I knew. He didn't remember me, but he'd just seen someone he couldn't forget. I thought that moment would pass, that Ryan would shrug it off, forget the kid with the big eyes who asked about motorcycles. But something had shifted. The next day, I passed the garage on my way to the post office. Ryan was outside again, leaning against the doorway, staring at the sidewalk like it owed him answers. He didn't speak, just nodded. His eyes lingered on Caleb again longer this time. 2 days later, he showed up at the florist shop below Mama's place, said he was looking for a small arrangement. A gift for a friend. I knew it was an excuse. He waited until I was alone at the counter, then said, "Your boy, he's got my eyes." My fingers tightened around the ribbon I was tying. "Excuse me?" "I'm not trying to make it weird," he said. "It's just something about him. His stare. I used to look at my reflection and see that same look. Still do, some mornings." I forced a laugh. Lots of kids have brown eyes. He didn't laugh back. "That's not what I meant, and you know it." I turned away, fast. "You're mistaken." "Maybe," he said quietly. "Or maybe I'm just trying to remember something I forgot too fast." He didn't push further, just thanked me for the flowers and walked out. But I saw the way he moved slower, distracted. Later that week, I heard from Tom, the older mechanic. Said Ryan had been off all day, dropped tools, zoned out during repairs. Kept asking about a woman named Lena who used to live in town. No one remembered me as Lena Mercer, just Julia Evans. But Ryan was digging. I could feel it. That quiet kind of curiosity that doesn't ask loud questions but doesn't stop asking at all. Some nights I'd walk into Caleb's room and watch him sleep. The way his eyelashes curved, the way his mouth fell slightly open. He looked just like Ryan, and I hated how part of me wanted him to be seen, even if I wasn't ready to be. The day it happened felt ordinary enough. Caleb had convinced Mama to let him help with errands, which meant I ended up dragging him from shop to shop while he asked 24 questions about how light bulbs worked and why pine trees didn't lose their needles. We passed the garage again. I tried to keep him moving, but a row of old classic cars caught his eye. I gave in, told him 5 minutes. Ryan was under a Jeep, boots sticking out. He slid out just as Caleb crouched near the front bumper. They started talking about engines, camshafts, stuff Caleb picked up from some book I didn't even know he had. I kept my distance, pretended to be checking my phone, but I was listening, watching. Then Caleb, in his excitement, yanked off his knit cap and dropped it. It tumbled into a puddle near Ryan's feet. Ryan picked it up, shook it out, handed it back with a smile. But in that moment, something changed in his face. Barely visible. Just a flicker. He stared down at the cap for a second too long. Something clung to it, a single strand of fine, dark brown hair. I saw it. So did he. I called Caleb over, quickly, said we had to go. He pouted, but followed. Ryan didn't say anything, just stood there, turning the hat slowly in his hand before tossing it into the trash bin out back. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing the way Ryan had said, "He's got my eyes." Kept seeing that strand of hair between his fingers. I told myself it was nothing, that I was just being paranoid, that he wouldn't actually do what I feared. But deep down, I knew better, because I remembered the man he was. Curious, restless, stubborn as hell when something didn't add up. The next morning, the mailbox held no surprises, but my chest felt tight all day, like the air itself had started to brace. Some truths don't crash in, they whisper ahead of the storm. It was a Tuesday, the kind of day where the sky stays gray no matter what time it is. Mama had gone to her doctor's appointment. Caleb was building a rocket out of cereal boxes in the living room. I was folding laundry when the knock came. 3 short taps. Not urgent. Not hesitant either. Just steady. I opened the door and there he was, Ryan. He didn't smile, didn't even say hello, just held out a plain manila envelope, slightly crumpled at the corners. He looked at me for a long second, then placed it gently on the entryway table beside me. "I didn't want to believe it," he said quietly, "but I had to know." I didn't touch it, didn't need to. I knew exactly what was inside. He nodded once. "I'll go." And just like that, he turned and walked away. I stood there, the air buzzing in my ears. Caleb called from the other room, asking if he could use tinfoil for the rocket boosters. I said yes, but my voice came out strange like it didn't belong to me. I waited until I heard the front gate click shut. Then I opened the envelope. 2 pages. Lab header. Clean fonts. Sharp language. Probability of paternity. 99.998%. My knees gave out before the tears did. I sank onto the floor, the pages trembling in my hands. He knew. There was no more hiding. No more maybe. No more what if. Ryan Brooks was Caleb's father. And yet, when Mama came home and found me still sitting there, red-eyed and hollow, all I could say was, "He doesn't get to claim him." Because that was the only truth I had left. I was the one who stayed, who held Caleb through every fever, every night terror, every scraped knee and birthday wish. Ryan had a piece of paper. I had a life built from scratch and sacrifice. And I wasn't ready to give any of it up. Not to a man who disappeared before sunrise. Not to someone who only started caring after a lab confirmed what my heart had known for 5 long years. The next morning, I found it on our porch, wrapped in a plain brown paper bag, no note attached. Just sitting there quietly, like it had always belonged. I didn't need to open it to know what was inside. I recognized the weight, the shape, the faint smell of old wool and pine. Ryan's beanie, the one he left behind all those years ago on a frosted windowsill, when I woke up alone with more questions than answers. He must have come back late, after Caleb was asleep. Slipped it onto the porch like a thief returning something he once stole. I carried it inside like it might break. Caleb was already in bed, curled under the quilt with his rocket ship beside him. I sat on the edge of the mattress and stared at him for a long time. His chest rose and fell in small, steady rhythms. One arm was tossed over his head, his other hand still clutching a piece of foil. I didn't know how to explain what was happening. To him. To me. to the space between us that suddenly felt fragile. I placed the beanie beside him without thinking. He stirred in his sleep, fingers brushing against it. Then, instinctively, he pulled it to his chest and held it there like a stuffed animal. I pressed my hand over my mouth. That hat's something I had once buried in a box of things I swore never to touch again. Now rested against the heart of the one person I'd spent 5 years protecting. And suddenly I didn't know who I was protecting him from anymore. Ryan? The truth? Or the version of myself that might shatter if I let go of control? I turned off the light and stood in the doorway, watching the shadows settle. He looked so small, so innocent, and I felt like a coward. Because some secrets don't just ruin relationships. They rewrite who you are. And once they surface, they don't just take the lie. They take the part of you that survived by keeping it. He didn't come back, not with questions, not with anger, not even to see Caleb again. Instead, the packages started arriving. The first one came on a Thursday, wrapped in plain brown paper, addressed only to C. Evans. Inside was a thin sketchbook and a pack of colored pencils. Tucked into the first page was a small drawing Caleb, sitting cross-legged by the old garage, staring at that rusty motorcycle like it was magic. I recognized the pencil strokes immediately. The second package held a children's book about airplanes, with a note written in clean, careful script. For the boy who asked better questions than most grown men I know. R. Caleb lit up. He thought it was from Santa at first, but I told him the truth. A friend sent it, someone who remembers you. He asked if he'd meet that friend again. I changed the subject. The third package was a small Polaroid camera, refurbished, with a single photo inside. Caleb, candid, mid-laugh, clearly taken without him noticing. It must have been from the day at the garage. That one rattled me, because I realized Ryan hadn't just seen Caleb, he'd watched. Observed him the way photographers do. Carefully, quietly, honestly. Caleb started asking when another package would come. Every morning he'd check the front step. Sometimes there was nothing. Sometimes there was a note, always signed the same way. Keep being curious. He started keeping them in a box under his bed, called it my treasure chest. Said when he grew up, he'd send letters back. I didn't have the heart to tell him he already was growing up. Fast. I watched from the kitchen window as he sat on the porch one afternoon, flipping through the sketchbook, humming to himself. And I hated how happy it made him. Because every drawing Ryan sent pulled Caleb a little closer to someone I wasn't sure I could trust. But even worse, I wasn't sure if I wanted to keep trusting myself. Some men knock on doors, some just leave things behind and wait. Ryan never knocked, but somehow he was already inside. That night I found him curled up sideways across his bed, one leg dangling, arms wrapped tight around the old beanie. It had faded more since I first found it on the porch. The stitching frayed along the edge, the fabric thinned with time, but Caleb held onto it like something precious, like safety. I leaned against the doorway, watching him shift in his sleep. He mumbled something, soft and dreamlike. I moved closer, knelt down. His lips barely moved, but I caught it. Uncle Mason is a superhero. I swallowed hard. That name, Mason. I hadn't heard anyone say it in years, not even me. It wasn't just a nickname. It was the name Ryan gave once, jokingly, when he said, "Ryan's too boring." Mason sounds like a guy who builds things. Apparently, Caleb remembered it from one of the notes. Apparently, it stuck. I sat beside him for a long time, listening to the rise and fall of his breath. My hands trembled on my lap. Not from fear. From choice. Because I'd come to a crossroads. For 5 years, I'd chosen silence. I'd held the reins so tight I didn't realize how much I'd bruised myself in the process. But now, there was a boy who believed in a man he barely knew. A man who, for all his failures, had started showing up in the only way I would let him. And maybe that counted for something. At midnight, I sat at the kitchen table and wrote a note. "You can see him once. That's all I'm offering. No promises, no games, just one afternoon." I signed it with just my name. Julia. No last name, no explanations. Just a door, barely cracked open. I slipped it into an envelope, placed it on the porch bench where his last package had been, and went back inside before I could change my mind. Sometimes, surrender doesn't look like forgiveness. Sometimes, it's just letting go of the fear long enough to take one shaky step forward. We chose the park behind the old courthouse. It wasn't fancy, just a few benches, a swing set, and a winding path shaded by oaks. But it had space. Space to breathe. Space to run. Space to leave if things felt wrong. I told Caleb we were meeting someone who sent him all the packages. His eyes lit up. He asked if it was Santa. I said no, just a friend who remembered him. When we arrived, Ryan Mason was already there, sitting on the bench, elbows on knees, hands clasped like he wasn't sure what to do with them. He looked up the moment we rounded the path, stood almost too quickly, like his body had moved before his mind caught up. Caleb ran the last few steps. No hesitation, just motion. "Hey!" he shouted. "You're real!" Ryan laughed, surprised, breathless. "I've been called worse." They stood facing each other, and for a second, neither moved. Then Caleb reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the sketchbook Ryan had given him. "I brought this," he said, flipping to a page. "I drew you back." Ryan crouched beside him, took the book like it was made of glass. "You're better than I was at your age." Caleb beamed. I stayed back. Let it unfold. There were no questions, no awkward declarations. Just two people finding each other like puzzle pieces that didn't realize they'd been missing a match. Ryan never once looked at me for permission, never tried to cross a line. He let Caleb lead, asking what he liked to build, what he wanted to be. They talked about engines, dinosaurs, space travel. They laughed. It was easy. Too easy. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was holding up a wall. I sat on a bench a few feet away, hands tucked in my coat, heart rattling like a box of loose change. There were no promises exchanged that day. No talk of the future. But as the wind moved through the trees and the sky dipped toward evening, I watched my son smile at a man he'd just met, and I realized something. Sometimes, you don't need a plan. You just need one quiet moment that doesn't hurt. The sun was slipping behind the ridge, casting that soft, golden light only October knows how to give. Caleb had worn himself out chasing fallen leaves, pretending they were comets crashing into Earth. Ryan sat beside him in the grass, helping him build a rocket from sticks and pine cones. I was still on the bench, watching from a distance, not intruding, not deciding anything yet. Then it happened. Caleb held up his crooked little creation and grinned. "You think it could fly?" Ryan smiled, brushing dirt from his jeans. "I think if anyone could make it fly, it'd be you." Caleb looked at him for a long second, longer than usual for a 6-year-old. Then he tilted his head and asked, softly, almost shyly, "Are you my daddy?" Silence swallowed the park. Ryan blinked, once, then again. His jaw tightened, but his voice stayed steady. "Do you want me to be?" Caleb nodded. No hesitation. That was it. Ryan's hands went to his face, trying to catch what was already falling. Tears he hadn't planned to shed in front of anyone, let alone a child. His body folded forward slightly, as if the weight of the word had knocked the wind out of him. I stood. Not because I had to, not because it was expected, but because something inside me cracked. Not in pain this time, but in release. I walked toward them, slowly, carefully, each step shedding years of armor. Caleb turned to me, eyes wide, seeking confirmation, maybe even permission. I smiled. Just a small one, but it was enough. He reached out and grabbed my hand, pulling it toward Ryan's. 3 of us. A single thread, frayed but finally tied. I looked at Ryan, not with anger, not with blame, just clarity. Because in that moment, it wasn't about the past anymore. It wasn't about what he'd missed or what I'd protected. It was about a little boy who had finally found the word he'd been waiting to say. And I wasn't afraid of it anymore. I wasn't shielding him. I was listening, to him, to his heart, and for the first time in years, to my own. I stood on the porch of the garage that Saturday morning, fingers curled tight around something wrapped in flannel. The wind carried the scent of oil and cut grass. For a second, I nearly turned back, but then I saw him. Ryan under the hood of an old pickup, sleeves rolled, grease on his cheek. He didn't see me at first. I cleared my throat, and he looked up, surprised but not startled, like he'd been expecting this day to come, just never knew when. I walked closer. "You forgot something," I said. He wiped his hands on a rag. "Yeah?" I held it out. The old army cap. The one he'd left all those years ago. But now, stitched inside the brim neatly, carefully by my own hand, was a name. Caleb. He took it like it meant something sacred, turned it over, read the name. His jaw tensed. Then his voice, quieter than I'd ever heard it. "You stitched this?" I nodded. "It's his now," I said. "But I think he'd want you to have it until he's old enough to wear it right." He didn't answer right away, just stared at the cap, like it was a time machine that had finally come back around. Then, gently, he looked up. "I'm not going to make promises I can't keep, Lena," he said. "I won't talk about forever, or fixing everything." I waited. He stepped forward, voice steady. "But I can promise this. I'm staying. No matter how long it takes. No matter what it looks like. I'm not walking away again." Something in my chest softened. He didn't say he deserved another chance. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He just stood there, honest. That was the first time I realized I didn't need grand gestures, just this truth spoken plainly, and the choice to believe it. I handed him the cap. Our fingers touched for a second longer than they needed to, and for once, I wasn't scared of what came next. Not because I knew it would be easy, but because this time, I was the one stepping forward. Not as a mother protecting her child, not as a woman holding a grudge, but simply as me. The backyard hadn't changed much since I was little. Same creaky wooden fence, same patch of stubborn daisies refusing to die near the shed. The grass was a bit taller, the air a little crisper, but the space still held something gentle. This afternoon, Caleb's training wheels came off. He was determined, wobbly, fearless, 5 minutes away from either flight or bruises. Mason crouched beside him, one hand steadying the seat, the other on the handlebars. "You ready, little man?" Caleb grinned, helmet too big for his head, eyes lit with excitement. "Let's go, Daddy." That word still pulled at me, but less sharply now. I stood a few feet away, arms crossed, watching. Not interfering, just witnessing. Mason jogged alongside as Caleb pedaled, his voice steady, calm. "Keep going. I've got you." For the first time, I saw what I hadn't let myself hope for. Not just a man trying to make up for lost years, but a man learning, with patience, how to show up for today. Caleb faltered, tipped sideways. Mason caught him before he hit the ground. No anger, no frustration, just a chuckle, a tousle of hair, and "Try again?" They reset. I felt something uncoil in me, something I'd been gripping too tightly for too long. Later, we all sat on the back steps, Caleb between us, munching on apple slices like he'd just conquered Everest. Mason passed me a glass of lemonade, his eyes meeting mine. No big speeches, no pressure. Just presence. And I realized something. I didn't forgive him all at once. It wasn't dramatic or sudden, but somewhere between the tears and the truth, I'd started to believe again. Not in perfect endings, but in people who show up after the storm. I'd started to believe that maybe, this time, we'd grow something new, something honest, something ours. And as the sun dipped behind the trees, casting gold across the backyard, I looked at the two boys beside me, the one I raised, and the one still learning how to be a father. This wasn't a fairy tale. It was better. It was real. It was ours. And we were building it slowly, imperfectly, together. You don't have to be whole to begin again. A letter from Lena to the woman I once was, and maybe still am. If you're reading this, maybe you've lost something. Maybe someone left, or life slipped off the rails. Maybe you're carrying more than you ever expected, and no one really knows how heavy it's been. I know that weight. I carried it too through late-night shifts, silent tears, and the fear of a little boy looking up at me with questions I didn't have answers for. I used to believe love had to be perfect to count, that if someone broke you, or if you broke down, there was no coming back. No second chances. No place for softness in a world that had already hardened around you. But here's what I've learned. You don't have to be whole to begin again. And forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about freeing yourself to move forward. For 5 years, I raised my son alone. Not because I wanted to be a martyr, but because it was the only choice I trusted. His laughter became my rhythm, his little hands, my purpose. I told myself we didn't need anyone else, and for a while, that was true. But strength, real strength, isn't just independence. Sometimes it's letting someone help carry the weight. Sometimes it's allowing love to return, even if it shows up late, even if it's flawed, even if it scares the hell out of you. When Mason came back into my life, I didn't open the door. not right away. I wasn't ready to believe. I had a child to protect, and a heart I'd spent years teaching not to hope. And yet, when I saw him tie Caleb's shoelaces or sit beside him in silence at the park, I realized something no one told me. Love can learn. People can grow. Not every man stays the boy he once was. Sometimes, life teaches them what we never could. It's easy to stay guarded, to say, we're fine alone. But just because we can survive alone doesn't mean we have to. I'm not here to romanticize reunion or pretend every story like mine ends in warm backyards and second chances. Sometimes the door should stay closed. Sometimes protection is love. But if you're at that edge wondering whether to try again, whether to trust what once hurt you, ask yourself this. Is it fear keeping you safe? Or is it fear keeping you stuck? Because I almost walked away from something good, not because he didn't care, but because I didn't believe I was allowed to let him. I didn't want to need, didn't want to be vulnerable, didn't want to risk the kind of heartbreak that comes after you've already put yourself back together. But healing isn't about never hurting again. It's about choosing. This time, who's worth hurting with? So if you're carrying the kind of story I carried, if you've been the girl who was left, or the woman who stayed strong for too long, I want to tell you this. It's okay to change your mind. It's okay to let someone in. It's okay to hope again, even cautiously, even quietly. The past shaped you, but it doesn't own you. And no matter how much time has passed, you are still worthy of a future that feels gentle when it touches your skin. You don't owe anyone your forgiveness, but you do owe yourself the chance to not live in fear of the past forever. I'm still learning, still softening in places I thought had hardened for good. But now, when I see Mason teaching Caleb how to ride a bike, or hear them laugh about something I missed in the other room, I don't just feel lucky, I feel brave. Because letting someone come back into your life when they once walked away isn't weakness, it's courage, and it's yours to claim whenever you're ready. With all my heart, Lena.